Hello, everyone. We are Above Atlantis, and our objective is to provide high quality flood information at low cost to communities in BC. Today, 10% of Canada's population lives in high risk flood zones. Of those, only 6% are aware that they live in these risk areas. Financially, flooding can be catastrophic, causing billions of dollars in damage, with these costs growing each year. As we look into the future, flood mitigation will become increasingly important. These climate change scenarios show a future with increasing rainfall intensity, which will lead to stronger and more frequent floods. Currently, established firms like NHC provide traditional engineering approaches to mapping floodplains. Flood maps by the Fraser Basin Council and the Okanagan Basin Water Board are examples of new collaborative projects with these firms. However, these are expensive, costing millions and taking years to complete. These efforts are not reaching many BC communities. In 2016, 79% of municipalities in BC were either using outdated flood maps or lacked flood maps entirely. Smaller communities, including First Nations, struggle the most in producing new flood maps. With their limited resources, they're often unable to hire conventional consulting firms. Meanwhile, these communities are most vulnerable to the impacts of floods, having fewer resources for recovery. Every dollar a community invests in flood mitigation, 10 can be saved in potential damages. For smaller communities, affordable technical support and flood risk mapping can provide high return on investment. This is where Above Atlantis comes in. Overall, we found that the lack of flood risk communication is the result of three issues. One, existing flood information is scattered between entities, making it difficult to find. Two, the terminology and concepts used for technical flood maps pose a knowledge barrier to the general public. And three, many communities lack the flood maps themselves, as well as the input data required to produce them. And thus, to address the problem landscape, we have categorized the solutions into four services. Data cataloging. We'll develop a centralized resource for users to be directed to existing floodplain data. Data collection. We can collect less data due to the lower input requirements for a flood model. Flood modeling. We'll develop a simpler and more efficient flood model that lowers costs and increases flexibility. And data visualization. We'll prioritize effective, intuitive communication of flood information using revised language and 3D visualization. With our solution, we'll address the barriers facing small communities in BC. Our data catalog will address scattered information. Our visualizations will make the knowledge and language of floods more accessible, and our efficient data collection and flood modeling methods will fill the lack of data. Ultimately, engage the public in effective flood mitigation. To provide these solutions, we employ a number of technologies. Services like AWS allow for affordable server hosting and control. Consumer drones are inexpensive and can be equipped with cameras and sensors to easily conduct precise remote surveys. The data can be fed into new models like the HAND model, standing for height above nearest drainage. It provides a cheaper and simpler approach that can be paired with machine learning on historic flow data to produce very accurate maps. And finally, software like Blender and Unity can be used to produce dynamic interactive visualizations that create an online experience that can be easily shared and understood. And so for our demonstration, if you'd like to explore it yourself, you can actually go to aboveatlantis.com/app. And so this here is what the end user will be able to see with our visualizations. As you can see, the visualization is fully interactive and dynamic. You can move around, zoom in and out. And also, the user is able to dynamically adjust the flood levels. So we have a slider here, and this poses a much better visualization of flood impacts on the community. These visualizations can be the output of our flood models, or we can plug into existing flood models and flood maps to provide these visualizations. And so our services are designed to be packaged independently to market at varying price points, ranging from $5,000 to $50,000. At the lower end, we can provide basic services like map digitization. At the higher end, we'll provide a full suite of services. These price points are intended to be lower than conventional firms. Here's an example how we can partner with a municipality to provide our services. The Union of BC Municipalities administers the Community Preparedness Fund. which is used for investments in flood mitigation and planning. We'll collaborate with the municipality to submit an application for this grant. And once that grant application is approved, we'll receive the first half of our funding to initiate our services for the municipality. And we provide the services. And following the delivery of that service, we'll develop we'll deliver a final report to the UBCM. We'll then receive the latter half of our funding. This means, to be clear, the municipalities that we provide services for actually do not need to pay for our services and can find funding from other areas. In our first quarter, we'll be focused on developing and verifying our flood model, and our main expenses will be in wages and server costs. In our second quarter, we'll deploy our processes to the cloud and refine our data collection methodology. Here, we'll seek to secure our first clients. Our second quarter revenue will be from our smaller services. Our main expenses will be towards wages, marketing, and hardware rentals. In our third quarter, we'll be preparing a complete solution package to apply to CEPF with clients. During this quarter, we'll also receive our first funding from this grant. The most significant expense will be from marketing, since we'll produce our services at a greatly reduced cost to attract their first clients. And in our fourth quarter, we'll be focused on delivering the first of our large projects. Now the costs are more representative of our sustained business model and focused on our client's product and the acquisition of new clients. As we build our reputation and reduce our costs through acquiring our own hardware and automating our tasks, we'll be able to increase our profit margins while simultaneously offering our services at a lower price to customers. So this graph here is a cost, revenue, and profit per client. With the initial support from AquaHacking and MyTax, we'll be able to end our first year with a modest net profit of $24,750. Back to the bigger picture. So many communities in BC are at risk of floods. They need our support, and it is above Atlantis' goal to make communities more resilient and empowered in the face of these floods. I encourage you all to check out our website, aboveatlantis.com.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, team Above Atlantis.
Thank you very much for your time. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
Great. So we'll now move into the 10 minutes for the judges' questions.
So it looks like your customer will be the municipalities, but the funding they'll leverage from other institutions, and you'll help them with that. Is that the correct understanding?
Yes, that's a correct understanding.
And is there any additional ongoing revenue after the first project is done? So or is it just a one-time thing that you do with the municipalities? They get that modeling and then you're done?
So depend on the client's needs in particular. So as we expand our services, we're anticipating that we can add things like forecasting floods. So that can be like we'll take the live data that's available of rivers in BC and plug that into the model and provide a real-time forecast. So that's something that can be more like an ongoing service that is provided, but that's something that we still need to develop.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your software? Because like the Insurance Bureau of Canada and others have platforms that do flood mapping. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't quite sure what the difference is or how you're differentiating in the market.
Yeah, so there are flood maps that already exist. There's flood models that already exist. And to be entirely upfront, there's people who are doing a better job in how accurate and precise these maps are. The difference that we're going to pose is that we can do it at a lower price point. We're going to make it more simple, more straightforward, and make it a shorter engagement with each client so that the municipalities can benefit from those maps as quickly as possible. And also that we're designing how we're presenting that information to be more accessible by the public. And this is important for smaller communities because in a larger community, usually there's like a municipality, they make the decisions, they tell people, oh, this is where you can build, this is where you can't build. But in a smaller community, in a rural setting, each person who lives there has more agency and has more responsibility to take care of themselves and those around them. So making that information more accessible to each person is important for our services.
Thank you.
Hi, can you get back to the slide where you had the 4 technical steps
Yes.
of your solution?
Sorry. right here.
Yeah, perfect. So from my understanding, your Blender demo works. Saw it on your app, but it takes all of these steps to be connected and working for your solution to work. So how's your MVP doing in terms of where you're at in terms of each step in the connectedness?
So our visualizations are working. Our hand model is it works, but it's on an ArcGIS platform. So we're working on making the outputs of that hand model more compatible with the visualization. And in terms of the drones, like the data collection wise, I've been working on like the structure from motion technique, which basically you take like a video of an object and it generates a 3D model from the changing perspective. And so I'm comfortable with working with that piece of software, but I have not worked with drones yet. So essentially, there's a bunch of little like pieces, and to make our minimum viable product, we're going to be prioritizing like connecting these aspects together, and so it's like a simple, straightforward solution to the problem.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're giving yourselves 6 months to get the MVP, the basic blocks connected, and then you help municipalities apply to the grant.
Yes.
And for the grant, have you started reaching out to UBCM yet, or?
Yeah, so I actually contacted the program officer of UBCM, and that is actually where we got the idea that like applying with municipalities is a really important part, because municipalities, one of the barriers that they face is the smaller communities don't have like a dedicated engineering team that has the background to put in an application that is good enough for them to approve, because it's a competitive grant. So that's where we can help them send in this application with the technical background necessary to be competitive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question. I'm going to break this down. So you're trying to create flood maps, and you've got some technology where you're going to be putting in new data that you collect. But if I recall from your materials, you are also approaching others to secure existing data to help you build the flood maps. And so if I'm correct, that's what I thought. So explain to me why they would give you that data. And I'm jumping because a lot of other organizations have worked very hard, have had to compete and find money to get their own data. And explain to me why they would give it to you so you can build a business off that.
So the current situation with data sharing in British Columbia is, it's a lot of it's closed. A lot of municipalities are like holding on to it because like they've received the funding competitively. But there's a movement right now to work towards establishing an open catalog to some of those data sources. So there's potential in the future that things will be more open. In terms of our business in particular, we are planning to be sort of a directory rather than like a repository of data. So being like, yes, this data exists and someone over there has it, you can go contact them and pay for it if you want, or if you judge it's too expensive, then you can make it yourself. But like, people don't even know where to start looking. Like, they don't even know that the data exists at this point for a lot of municipalities and communities. So that's a very first step that we have to do, because we don't want to waste our time like collecting data that already exists, right? So just to lay sort of like ground base, the foundation to this, we're going to be figuring out what data already is out there.
And explain to me then one quick question. Walk me through what a citizen, because you talked about the problem with citizens not even knowing that they live in a flood zone. Presumably they'd make different decisions if they did. But walk me through what that looks like at the end. How does a citizen actually find out about this, and what do they do? What do you see them doing?
So the ways that I anticipate our technology being used, so by seeing these 3D visualizations, they may be more motivated to take action. So actually like buy sandbags and invest in like flood infrastructure for their properties. That dashboard can also help with planning emergency response or evacuation routes, etc., because you can see which roads get flooded first and whatnot. And in terms of engaging the communities, because we were thinking about reaching out to like volunteer fire departments, because those are the ones that are really responsible for safety in these smaller communities. So reaching out to those organizations to be like, here's a tool. They're probably already doing good engagement with their community about safety as well. So we're going to explore that channel for distributing our product.
Well, I've got a question. It sounds, I don't know if you studied like Clayton Christensen's, theory of disruptive innovation and the innovator's dilemma. They're very, very good tomes for any of the innovators to read. But he talks about low-end innovation, where a product comes in that's not maybe quite enterprise level at the very start. It's not, but it's got a lower price point and its functionality is good enough. And it sounds like you've almost got something that's a little bit less expensive than what's available, but maybe it's good enough. I'm wondering if I'm right in that. Maybe you could, answer that question first, please.
So the hand model, that aspect is definitely along those lines, where it's, of course, when you put in lots more data, lots more expenses, smarter people, you're going to get a better model, right? But it takes a lot of money and effort to do that. So the hand model makes the data input cheaper and requires less technical ability to put into place. Another advantage it has fundamentally over traditional models is that it's quicker to compute. So if you were to plug in a hand model into some sort of forecasting ability, it could actually be done quickly enough that, given, I don't know, how like there's a higher discharge upstream, so you can see that discharge and predict within 3 hours there's going to be a flood down here. But the current flood models take a long time to compute, so it's not possible to run that kind of analysis.